What a charmer, I muttered, taking a drink from my glass. My shadowy corner tucked away at one end of the packed bar in Leicester Square was the perfect place to keep an eye on my target. A man in his 40s, currently entertaining a small crowd several tables away. Reedy, in a slate grey suit, the target had his new friends laughing and the drinks flowing. His wandering hands for the women hadn't gone unnoticed either, but a few jealous boyfriends were the least of Gareth Clark's problems. On the outside, Mr. Clark was a typical London city boy, just out for a pint. No harm done, mate. But that Gareth Clark was a mask. The real Gary was a pencil pusher, whose idea of adventure was wearing a red tie instead of the grey pinstripe he'd worn for the last 20 years. The divorced Mr. Clark had recently bought himself a Porsche and hired routine visits from high-end escorts. And right now he was running up a bar tab that had the staff bending over backwards to tend to his every need. Maybe Gary was having a midlife crisis. Or maybe it was more to do with the fact that Gary was an unregistered latent who happened to be cash rich and have an artifact in the pocket of that cheap grey suit, making him as harmless as a nuclear bomb. Gary laughed, triggering his friends to laugh too loud with him. I wasn't sure which of us was the sadder man. Him for having to pretend to be something he wasn't, or me drinking alone on a Friday night. I was here for work, but this was me most nights. I waved the bartender over and had him top up my drink. Gary's agency file suggested that once I'd introduced myself, he wouldn't put up a fight, not physically. A stiff breeze could blow Gary over. But being a latent, he had certain abilities known as a trick, which made him volatile. And when amplified with an artifact, that trick had the potential to be explosive. Charming Gary could flatten Leicester Square to rubble, which was why I had eyes on the unassuming Gary Clark, and why his midlife crisis was about to come to an abrupt end. Approaching him inside the bar was too risky. Too many bystanders, too many unknowns. Luckily, Gary was a creature of habit. His exploits during the last few weeks suggested 10 minutes from now he'd leave the bar, hail a cab, and head toward Piccadilly. That was when I'd have a quiet word. In an ideal world, he'd see the error of his ways, hand over the artifact, and let me escort him to the local cop shop for processing.